Hello, welcome back to Tiny Artist TV. I'm having a crappy day, so that's why I'm having ice cream. But, crappy day aside, today is the first video for March of Robots, and I couldn't find an official prompt list on Twitter, so I'm gonna go ahead and go with my original idea. So what I'm planning on doing is doing mechanized versions of fantasy creatures, and of course I'm going to be using the Draw It app to do my fantasy character generator. And I'm also going to be using the coolers.co website to distinguish color palette, because sometimes it's just easier to have someone else pick the colors for you. So, our fantasy character, wrong thing. Going mystic creature, not fantasy character. It was a bad day. So we're going to be doing a Kawaii Cerberus. And then our color palette is going to be Neon Cerberus. Alright, let's get started. Of course, like with most of my fantasy creature videos, I will be sharing some stories and lore about whatever mystical creature I'm doing. I'm pretty sure most of you guys are actually already familiar with Cerberus, but even if you are, I'm still going to be sharing those facts anyway. Starting off, as you may already know, Cerberus, also known as the Hound of Hades, is the multi-headed dog who guards the gates of the underworld, preventing the dead from leaving, and making sure that those who enter never leave. Apparently, Cerberus also has some siblings. As a child of Typhon and Echidna, he was part of a monstrous family which included Orthus, the Lernaean Hydra, and the Chimera. Only on 3 occasions, Cerberus was tricked by visitors of Hades. Heracles, also known as Hercules, did it with his strength, Orpheus did it with his music, and Sybil of Cumae with a honey cake. So, more about Cerberus's family, because actually I didn't know that Cerberus had a family. I thought he was just, standalone character. So it goes to show you can learn something every day. According to Hesiod, Cerberus was the second of the 4 monstrous children of Typhon, being born after Orthus, the 2-headed hound who guarded the cattle of Geryon, but before the Lernaean Hydra, and possibly before the Chimera, all of them being multi-headed. I'm sure you guys are also familiar with the Hydra, especially if you've seen the Hercules Disney animated feature, or even if you're just like a D&D buff or someone who likes weird lore, the Hydra being the multi-headed dragon. Later authors list many other monsters among the siblings of Cerberus, including the Sphinx, the Nemean lion, the Caucasian eagle, the Crommyonian sow, the Colchian dragon, Ladon, and even Scylla and the mother of the Gorgons, Echidna, which would mean that in some tales, Echidna is Cerberus's mother, and in some tales, Echidna is Cerberus's sister. But have you seen Greek family trees? It's entirely possible that somehow she is both. Cerberus's portrayal has seen a number of different artistic interpretations over the years. As to the number of Cerberus's heads, we have contradictory testimonies. Hesiod, for example, after pointing out that Cerberus's monstrosity was almost indescribable, also adds that he, the brazen-voiced Hound of Hades, is 50-headed, relentless and strong creature who feeds on raw flesh. Pindar goes a step further, claiming that Cerberus had 100 heads, not unlike his father Typhon. However, possibly due to practical reasons, he is almost exclusively shown with only 3 heads, and sometimes as little as 2 or even just 1 head. I guess if you draw him in front of the gates of hell, it still looks like Cerberus. Anyway, later authors trying to reconcile the description started claiming that Cerberus had 3 dog heads, and the rest of the heads were snakes that spurted from his back, with the venomous snake serving as his tail, which shows up in Heracles/Hercules' 12 labors, which, if you don't have a easy stomach for gore, or if you haven't played through God of War, I wouldn't recommend reading through Hercules' 12 trials. They're very, just trigger warning before you read them. The last and thus most difficult of the 12 labors of Heracles, set for him by Eurystheus, was bringing Cerberus up from the underworld. Hades allowed this, but only on the condition that Heracles managed to do it without using any weapons. Even though Heracles was bitten by Cerberus' serpent tail, he managed to put the dog into a stranglehold and persevere long enough until Cerberus finally passed out. After this, Heracles fettered him with adamant chains and dragged the hound to Eurystheus, who was so horrified by the sight, he hid in his great jar. So, earlier I had mentioned that Cerberus is kind of prominent within 3 different stories, so of course that was the first one being featured in Heracles' 12 Trials, the second one being Charmed by Music featuring Orpheus and Aeneas. So when Eurydice died, Orpheus went to seek his beloved in the underworld. Cerberus wasn't going to let him pass, but Orpheus charmed him with his music, and the hound, tamed beyond recognition, stepped aside. Even though Orpheus was able to best our best boy Cerberus here, his story was not a happy one. So I know this video is about Cerberus, but I really want to read you guys the end of this story here, because it's actually also featured in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. Also, if you haven't read that comic and you're into comics, you're missing out. Go read it. The art is beautiful. The story is awesome. But the ending of Orpheus's encounter with Cerberus and the creatures of the underworld here is that Hades and his wife Persephone granted Eurydice back to Orpheus under one condition. Eurydice must walk behind him as they ascended back to the upper world, and Orpheus was forbidden to look at her. Just before they reached the surface, Orpheus was so overcome with passion that he turned around to look at Eurydice. He was immediately turned into a ghost and sent back to the underworld forever. Orpheus's own fate was to be dismembered by Thracian Maenads, the female worshippers of Dionysus. And that's actually a pretty similar fate for worshippers of Dionysus. Not going to get into it in this video, but if you read other stories about them, there's one that's pretty tragic involving a mother and her son and this cult of Dionysus. Our third story is a little bit of a shorter one. When Aeneas, who is a Trojan hero in Greek mythology, visited the underworld, he had some more than necessary help from Sibyl of Cumae, who was also mentioned in the above of being able to trick Cerberus. Sibyl of Cumae, who threw Cerberus a honey cake spiced with a few drowsy essences. Cerberus ate it and fell asleep in no time. The expression, a sop for Cerberus, originates in this story, and it means quieting an uncooperative person by giving him a bribe. This next little fact about Cerberus has kind of been circulating the internet as kind of a back, I guess, when the internet was going through its trying to make monsters cute phase. So you may have heard this one. I've definitely heard this one. The name Cerberus comes from the Greek Kerberos, meaning spotted. So that being tied to a lot of people were going around saying, oh, Hades named his dog Spot, that's adorable. Okay, yeah, it is kind of cute, and it also kind of feeds into today's theme of trying to make Cerberus kawaii. To those of my non-Japanese speaking audience, or those who were just not quote-unquote from the internet, kawaii just means cute. Anyway, to the Greeks, Cerberus was a monstrous 3-headed dog or hellhound with a serpent's tail, a mane of snakes, and lion's claws. His 3 heads were thought to represent the past, the present, and the future, not unlike the Fates, while others were to suggest they were symbolic of birth, youth, and old age. The most potent ability of Cerberus was his look, which was so dreadful that anyone who looked upon him was immediately turned into stone. Interesting. It was said that Cerberus had razor-sharp teeth and a poisonous bite. The poison that drips onto the ground springs up as a plant that's known as wolfsbane. Now, of course, even though Cerberus got his start in Greek literature, of course he's made several other appearances. Cerberus is featured in many works of ancient literature, although the depiction surrounding the mythological creature often differs by author and culture. Cerberus appears in Dante's Inferno guarding the third circle of hell rather than the entire underworld. This is the circle of gluttony, and Cerberus is used to personify uncontrollable appetite. Cerberus is also featured in many prominent works of Roman literature, and most famous is in Virgil's Aeneid, and the story of Orpheus in Plato's Symposium, and in Homer's Iliad, which is the only known reference to one of Heracles' labors which first appeared in a literary source. Norse mythology has an equivalent of Cerberus where hell is guarded by a four-eyed dog named Garm. In Egypt, his incarnation was Anubis, the dog that guarded tombs and conducted the souls to the underworld. Some writers, such as the Greek poets Hesiod and Horace, claim Cerberus had as many as 50 or 100 heads, and in other descriptions they are in the shape of a lion, dog, and wolf, respectively. So a little more similar to a chimera, which would make sense since he is the big brother of the chimera, according to Hesiod. In pop culture, a character based on the beast appears in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, called Fluffy. He's lulled to sleep by a flute by Harry in a manner quite similar to the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Well, as you can see towards the end here, I was having a little bit of difficulty running GIMP and Filmora at the same time, so I had to finish today's drawing off screen, but I hope regardless you guys enjoyed today's video and the stories about Cerberus. So, I'm going to be doing, of course, another random beast next Tuesday/Wednesday, just depending on what my schedule dictates. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you like this video, give it a like, tell your friends, and if you haven't subscribed yet but you enjoy watching me draw, go ahead and subscribe. What does it hurt? I only post about maybe once, twice a week. But yeah, so I'll see you guys next time, and have a weird day.